As Jesus is teaching, somebody interrupts him and he shares a parable. But the main point that I want to cover today is that men live to give, okay? Men live to give. We find meaning and purpose and joy and generosity. Any men in the room? You love to give. You love to give your time, your presence, and you love to give your money, and ultimately you love to give your lives. Because that's what manhood is being generous and being stewards with what God has given to us. I mean, all of us have seen immature men. Anybody here seen immature man before in your life? Okay, my wife is raising her hand, I bet. Maybe not. But all of us can be immature, and we've all seen immaturity in other people, right? Like grown people who are acting like they're much younger. But what I want to say is that men live to give. And what we're going to see today is they live to give their presence, like they're relationally present with people. They live to give their time, and they live to give their money. And ultimately, my last point is they live to give their lives. So if you could grab a Bible. We're going to be in Luke chapter 12. There should be some, you might be sitting on, like, this chair is really hard. That's a hardback Bible. Otherwise, it's going to be on the screen behind me. Luke chapter 12, this is the CSB, Christian Standard Bible version. It says this, as we first see that we are called, or men live to give their presence, or their relational presence. It says this. It says, someone from the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." So Jesus has been teaching. Thousands of people are trampling over each other to hear his teaching. He's very popular. He's been teaching on some cosmic things about the leaven of the Pharisees, or the hypocrisy of the religious leaders. He's saying, don't be like those guys. Then he goes on to talk about not denying him before people, or he'll deny you before the angels in heaven, saying there's judgment for denying him. So there's like some big cosmic things. And in the middle of this dude just stands up and shouts out this personal request. And this is Jesus' response. Verse 14. He said, "Friend," he said to him, "who appointed me a judge or arbitrator over you?" He then told them, "Watch out and be on guard against all greed, because one's life is not found in the abundance of his" what? Possessions. Okay. So Jesus, like I said, he's teaching, and he's not teaching about, hey, you guys should like give me everything that you have, and I'm so amazing, I'm so great. He's talking about a kingdom thing, big cosmic things. And if you don't know Jesus could be very personable with people, but he also taught about true cosmic realities of heaven and hell, of sin, of righteousness, of living for God, and things like that. And he's having one of those messages, and out of nowhere, this guy interrupts him, not with a question like, "Oh, teacher, explain this matter to me more deeply." He said, "Hey, I want you to settle my estate with my family." And what was happening is his brother was probably the older brother. Older brothers got 2/3 of the estate when a father passed, and the younger brothers would split up the last 1/3. If you notice, this guy doesn't cry out, "Hey, Jesus, I'm struggling. My dad just died, and my brother won't talk to me." He's not asking for relational advice. What does he want? He wants his money. He wants his inheritance. And that probably was land and money, probably a combination of those two things. And Jesus responds to this guy who's not doing this in a good way by calling him what? What does he call him? He calls him friend. Right off the bat, he says friend, which is a very gracious thing for Jesus to do, because this guy just interrupted in front of thousands of people to talk about a personal matter. He calls him friend. He says that it's not his job to make him wealthy. He says, "It's not my job to arbitrate over your estate and over your inheritance," even though some rabbis would do this. That's why the man asked Jesus. And for us, it's not Jesus' job to make you wealthy. I hope we all understand that. If you don't know Jesus, you probably understand this really well, is that God's job is not to give you money, it's to give you life, right? But this man cries out for it. And then lastly, Jesus calls him greedy. Okay, and he gives him a warning that life is not found in the abundance of one's possessions. Because again, this guy could care less about his brother and about his father who just died. He wanted his money. So when my grandmother died, she died before I was born. My father became the trustee of the estate. And he had 2 brothers. In the estate, there was money for college and things like that. And there was also a piece of land in Hawaii worth about $3 million, okay? And the land was supposed to stay in the trust. And eventually they started suing each other to sell this piece of land. And about 10 years later, they sold the land. They each got about $1 million. And they've long since spent that money. And you know what happened? They no longer talk to each other, okay? And that's an example of finding life in possessions, in what we can get and what we can gain. And this advice from Jesus isn't really advice. When he says life is not found in the abundance of your possessions, he's not saying, hey, hey guy, if you could just to hear me out, this would be really good advice if you could just, he's warning this young man to stop. Does that make sense? This guy is on this track of obsessing over wealth and getting more and even getting what's rightfully owed. And Jesus warns him that it's not going to end well. It's in fact going to end badly for him.